Awesome. Well, again, Lynn, thanks for hopping in, man. We're really appreciative of you coming in tonight, especially in a busy off season for you. So how have things been for you so far as the Cardinal season's concluded? The off season's been in full swing.
Oh, things have been interesting, as the Cardinals go here, trying to put together the team for next season. Still, I guess actually by the time we go to spring training, it'll just be about a year for me being in St. Louis. It's been good. It's been good. I was having fun listening to some of the live stream earlier as before I hopped on. So, but yeah, it's been a cool off season just as far as still settling into St. Louis and getting used to how the Cardinals are doing things and trying to figure out what this is going to look like for next season after obviously a out of character season for them.
Yeah. So I believe you're covering the Royals before this. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So what has that transition been like over the last year, coming from covering Kansas City for a while to St. Louis, and especially during such an odd year like this? Like, of all years to pick covering the Cardinals, you picked probably the worst season to start. So like, what has that transition been like, just life wise to St. Louis, but then also covering a team that's just been all over the place?
St. Louis, I mean, because I've moved around a bunch. So, I mean, to go from Kansas City to St. Louis, was probably one of the, maybe not the shortest, but one of the closest ones in terms of just like, I grew up in Massachusetts and worked at the paper in upstate New York, Pennsylvania, Salt Lake City, Kansas City. And so to go from, I didn't even change states this time. So this is, it's like, I just drove a couple hours. So, but it has been interesting just, dealing with, you get to a new sort of newspaper covering a new team and like, new division. Like you don't realize how many things you got used to until you start doing everything different, whether it's, like the teams that we used to always see in the division when I was covering Kansas City and like, that group of visiting writers or the play-by-play people, all those people you got to get to know, switching it over and get to know new people here in St. Louis. So it's all been fun. It's just been, sort of like, I guess, like you say, a little bit of a transition, just getting to know some new people. That's why certain things like, like the winter meetings a couple of weeks ago was always cool because everybody's in the same place. So you get to see everybody who you've sort of, seen here and there throughout the season or over the years. So, but yeah, it was an interesting year. It seems like by the time you got to July, I started making sure I pointed out to people like, it wasn't just me. By the time we got to the end of the season, I'd be like, the Royals actually had a decent record a couple of years that I covered them, so I'm not taking the blame. So
that's awesome. Well, it's just so good to have you in St. Louis, Lynn. You put out some incredible stuff. And now, as some long-term viewers of the show will know, or long-time viewers will know, Andrew is the Ohtani superfan. Josh is the Glasnow superfan. And I am the resident Sonny Gray superfan. I'm the president of the Sonny Gray fan club. And I've just loved the stuff that you've been putting out lately about him. You've written a couple articles since he signed. I just want to ask, for those who haven't had the chance to read your work, what made Sonny Gray such a great fit for the Cardinals, both on the field and off the field?
Well, I think on the field, the fact that he's an innings guy who they know they can count on for quality starts. I think last year was 184. It was 184. It was somewhere between 182 and 184. I think is what his inning total was. He's a veteran guy, so you have an idea like what you're going to get out of him, as opposed to like one of the younger guys that hasn't been through it before. He's not a super high strikeout guy, but I mean he's I think he was right about a strikeout an inning last year, if I remember right. I'm not looking at the numbers in front of me, but I think it was. If it wasn't like 9 on the dot, it was like right around that.
Yeah.
Per 9, that is. And so he's also really good at not giving up home runs last year. I think it was that and fielder independent pitching. I think he might have led the league or the majors in both of those.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, best in baseball.
So I mean, And for the Cardinals, I think the big thing, at least the big thing you've heard John Mozeliak talk about, was just the idea of they have being able to count on innings out of their starting rotation. They felt like there was a trickle down with the bullpen last year, where you just had too many starts, where you had your bullpen getting worn out too early, having to go to it too often throughout the season. I feel like there were, especially early in the season, there was just a lot of sort of non-competitive starts that they had. And I think they feel like that sort of impacted their bullpen throughout the season. So that's why, Gray, Gibson, Lynn, that group, and the fact that they got it done so quickly, I think was, that was a definite sign of how they felt like things went wrong early on last season, as far as the shortcomings of the starting rotation and how that trickled down to the rest of the pitching staff. And then off the field, I think, the story I wrote there, talking with getting some insight from Rocco Baldelli, and just sort of what, who the manager of the Twins, and some of what Oliver Marmol had to say about Sonny's personality and how they feel like it's going to fit in with the clubhouse and the staff that they have now. He's just he's one of those old school sort of like bulldog type guys, but he's also a guy who seems like he really cares about, having an impact on teammates, on the pitching staff as a group. So it's just one of those guys, like, a veteran guy that, you sort of you probably expect him to be one of the leaders, at least in some effect, as far as the pitching staff and maybe even the clubhouse.
Yeah, that's so cool. Everything I've heard about him is just like, he's someone that loves baseball. He hates losing. He loves winning. And he's someone that's going to impact your team, whether he's pitching or not. He's going to mentor those young starters. And that's something the Cardinals really need. They have so many young starters who could all end up being really good at some point. Obviously, you've got Liberatore, you've got Zach Thompson, and then guys coming up too, between Roby, Hentz, McGreevy, Jerby. These guys are going to come up at some point during his time here. So that's very, very exciting. Something else about Sonny Gray that I've heard is he's kind of considered a student of the game. And I know we use that term a lot. I would use that to describe Victor Scott, who'd just been on here tonight. He was getting into the science a little bit about what he's been doing. Sonny Gray is somebody that's always tinkering with his game. He's changing his arsenal year over year. Last year, he introduced a sweeper, or he didn't introduce it, but he started throwing it a lot more. He brought back his cutter. And changing himself, redefining himself as a pitcher, it's worked really, really well for him. And even after years in which he's had a ton of success, like 2019, where he, I think, should have had much more Cy Young support than he got, he ended up making big adjustments again, and it worked in his favor. After a year like last year, do you see him continuing to redefine himself as a pitcher, continuing to make changes?
Well, I think when it comes to some of those veteran guys, like, they're always tinkering because as you get, I think part of it, just from, things you hear from different guys, or just, talking to different guys, like, I think part of it is, as you get older and just, you go through different changes, like, maybe there's things that you realize you're getting better at, or you're getting worse at, or you sort of have to adjust. Some of it might also just be, the league having so much, seen you so much and so much familiarity with you. And I think those guys are just always constantly sort of like tweaking things, or trying to change up their look, or, realizing there's things that they get better at, or you just get, different feedback from people. I think Sonny talked a little bit about, I think in that opening press conference, about just sort of like knowing who he is as a pitcher. And I think, he didn't say it specifically, but I feel like some of that goes back to, when he had sort of the down period there when he went to New York. I think, I want to say it was on the Foul Territory podcast you heard. I think it was Kratz was talking a little bit about that, about like, some of the feedback he was getting from the pitching coach there. And, I feel like, just things that happen along the way, change how guys approach things. And then that, affects how they pitch and how they, go about, tweaking different things as far as how they approach the game. So I would expect him to, continue doing that. Heck, in that press conference, I think it was, Benjamin Hockman, one of our columnists, asked him about things he could get better at, and he just starts taking the baseball and like showing grips and talking about like this and like just So I don't think he's a guy who's going to all of a sudden just say, yeah, I'm done, trying to change things up.
I love a guy that's always honing his craft. And he, like last year, he threw at least 6 pitches 8% of the time, which is just like unbelievable to have such a large arsenal like that. You have a lot of guys, especially these days, that are trending towards just like fastball slider. So to have a guy like Sonny Gray who does all that. But when he's doing all that, it's tough for fans to know, like, what is his out pitch? What do you consider Sonny Gray's like best offering or his best weapon, and the pitch he's going to go to that people are going to know, okay, like this is where he's getting somebody?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, having only seen him like, here and there, I'm not sure. Obviously he had so much success with that, the sweeper or if that's what you want to call it. But but I think it's going to be a matter of just sort of, what's best for the situation, the matchup, that sort of stuff. But I'm not sure if there's one, but I know obviously coming off of last year, the sweeper is one that I think is going to be in the back of everybody's mind. So it'll be interesting if that's sort of the way he goes, or if he plays off of that and something else becomes more effective because that's what people are looking for. We'll be interested to see.
Yeah. And then this is my last question about Sonny. Sorry. He is like my number one offseason target. I am so excited. I immediately went out and bought a jersey, and this is probably a formality, but like as things stand right now, he's got to be the opening day starter and the game 1 starter in a playoff series.
I would guess opening day starter. I guess, that would be my guess. That obviously, that's, months away from us actually even probably asking Ollie about that. And then playoff series, you would probably guess that too. Because that's a whole lot of ifs and thens, and then also just, things lining up because you might have to, pitch guys on certain turn just to make sure you get in the playoffs or to, I think if you're able to line things up as you want, then that would probably be the case. They're going to open up on the road. I was going to say the only thing I would wonder about, Sonny makes sense, and I don't know that it would actually be a question or not, but I just wonder if it had been at home, whether or not there'd be any sort of like leaning towards, a guy like Miles who's been here and who's sort of the holdover type guy who actually started last year when it was took over because it was going to be Waino, but it's on the road, so that's not really part of it either. So, but yeah, it's a long ways away from opening day, but that would be my guess. I would say.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah. So I'll jump in here. Hopefully Sonny Gray is not the opening day starter. Sorry, Sandy, but I would like the Cardinals to add another starting pitcher. Well, you think Yamamoto's not going to start over him?
Oh yeah, he probably would, but we don't know if that's possible.
Well, yeah, we just had Jim Hayes on earlier tonight, and he broke something down that's talked to Lars Newpart earlier this evening, and Lars Newpart told him that the Cardinals very much still have a chance of signing Yamamoto, and apparently Lars has been pushing for it a little bit. So, do you think there's any chances that the Cardinals acquire him or another top tier starting pitcher later down the road this offseason?
So you're saying there's a chance, huh? That's where we're at.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of a chance I would say with Yamamoto. I don't have specific information on that. I would say if what sort of has been floating out there about the dollar figure makes you probably a little bit skeptical that if they're talking about upwards of a $200 million deal, whether that would actually be something that would work out, but I don't know for sure one way or the other. I wouldn't necessarily count on it. I know, even as recently as the winter meetings, it sounded as though starting pitching or adding another starter wasn't necessarily on the front burner. It sounded more like adding a relief pitcher was going to be the next order of business, and I thought that could happen, fairly soon, based on the last the interview that John Mozeliak did on Sunday with KMOX. So I'm not sure that something like Yamamoto is in the cards. And it's also interesting. Just it's one of those things that's tough to gauge too, because there's still so many teams that are looking for starters. When you think about, the Yankees are still like going into the offseason, they probably needed to add multiple starters. The Dodgers have obviously added some, but of course, Shohei's not going to pitch this year either, too. So the Red Sox still looking to add starters. The thought was probably the Orioles are going to look to add starters. I know they have some internal type options, but I mean, so there's still a bunch of teams out there that are probably looking to add starters. And still haven't really seen a whole lot of movement at the top of that, the high profile names. I mean, Nola stayed where he was, Sonny, and obviously Glasnow wasn't a free agent, but there was the trade. But I mean, you still, nothing yet on Snell, Montgomery, it's Yamamoto. It's going to be interesting just to see how these things unfold. But yeah, I wouldn't say that the door is closed as far as adding a starting pitcher, at least from what I can tell. But I don't know that Yamamoto's in the cards. But if Lars says they're still trying, then I guess they're still trying.
Yeah, and trying versus succeeding in a market of $300+ million at this point seems like very different things. So we'll have to follow that and see what happens with it. Do you think there's maybe more of a likelihood on the trade market than if they were going to add a starter? It feels like, especially if they're going to be potentially adding a bullpen arm or two through free agency, that they would potentially look more toward a trade for ex-starter Dylan Cease, Jesus Luzardo, whatever someone's favorite name is. Do you think if they're going to add a starter, it's more likely via trade, or do you still think there's potential or equal potential for it to go through free agency?
If I had to guess, I would think probably the trade route might be more likely. I'm not sure how likely. I would guess, like I said, if I had to guess, I think maybe that's more likely. But I'm not sure if that's something that's likely for them to do at, right now they feel like they have to do, or if it's like, okay, they're going to go forward with the group they have. And then as you get into the season, get closer to the trade deadline, they revisit. I also feel like, because people sort of said, well, they moved so quick to add those pitchers, but then thought there was more coming. I also felt like by adding the 3 pitchers they did as fast as they did, it sort of gave them a chance to be a little more, I guess, put them in more of a bargaining position as far as whether it's trade or free agency. Because to me, at least, just looking at it from the outside, if you go into they were going into the offseason, said they need to add pitching, had 3 rotation spots open. And then whether you was talking to a free agent or a trade, whoever you're dealing with knows that, they sort of got you over a barrel, as opposed to now they feel like they can go forward with these 3 and they sort of have the, can walk away from the table sort of situation now where they can hold out and, go forward with what they got. So I think that puts them in a position where they can do, either and still feel comfortable and don't feel like they have to give up something they don't want to give up in order to make a deal happen. So I think that's also, part of that, part of the importance of them getting those guys done the way that they did.
Totally. And we saw examples of that last offseason on the trade market when they're talking to the A's about Sean Murphy or the Blue Jays about Danny Jansen, and some of the crazy, like Blue Jays wanted Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan for Jansen, and A's wanted reportedly like a Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar for Sean Murphy. And that's because everyone in the world knew they needed a catcher. So they had to go the 5th year with Wilton Contreras. So that's a really good point. When they come back to trades now, they don't have to meet that asking price. They have their people in place. We want to jump to a couple of listener questions as well as we're going through here. And so Jeff wanted to know if you noticed any big differences between covering an American League team versus covering a National League team.
I mean, nowadays with the DH, obviously, I don't know that it's that crazy different. I think for me, the biggest difference was just, the teams that you see on a regular basis. I mean, obviously, whether it was earlier talking about the division that you see all the time, or just, the teams that you probably saw some. I was going to say, if I'm trying to remember if I went to some ballparks that I haven't gone to before, but I don't know if I did this year. Because I think I'm only down to a couple now that I haven't been to. And I think there's a couple of them that I did not go to this year too. So,
Okay.
but trying to think if no, I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't know if the differences I would say were really so much related to American League, National League, as much as it was the teams that you're covering, the teams that you're seeing on a regular basis, and then also just more so just going from covering a Royals team to covering a Cardinals team. It's probably more of a difference than National League, American League to me.
Yeah, so I was about to ask that. So when you compare covering the Royals to covering the Cardinals, I mean, obviously you could talk about this team success is a big difference, and so maybe that's the biggest thing you notice. But is there anything even between availability or the way that the teams conduct themselves or the information they give out? Like, what are some of the differences you've noticed from Kansas City to being with the Cardinal or covering the Cardinals now?
I think one of the biggest things, at least because I wasn't there when they won, like when they went to the back-to-back World Series in 14 and 15. So when I was covering Kansas City, it was after that. But so far here in St. Louis, the biggest difference probably is going to be just the fact that like they're a lot of whether it's fans or whoever, like a lot of the atmosphere around the Cardinals is they're expecting to win. I mean, like in April, it was already getting rough. Like when when things were not off to a good start. I remember. I think it must have still been April. One time we were in the clubhouse in Busch talking to Nolan Arenado, and he even said something along the lines of like, it feels like things get way out of hand early. And it wasn't, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact quote. It was something like, basically acknowledging that like you can feel the pressure early on because they got off to a slow start. And I don't remember that being something that I noticed in Kansas City. Definitely not in that way, at least. Just at least from my perspective. And then as far as just the day-to-day stuff, I think every place is a little bit different. I'm trying to think if there's like a big difference. I think, and part of it also probably because I covered the team for as long as I did, but like, Dayton Moore was the head of the baseball operations in Kansas City. Probably talked to him more than us as a group probably talked to him more from what I remember at least than we probably have with Mo. But I'm trying to, I couldn't put a number on how many times we talked to Dayton because Dayton was probably a little bit more informal sometimes. And then also just the rest of the front office too, whether it was JJ, who now is JJ Piccolo is now the head of baseball operations with Kansas City. Like when he was an assistant GM or at one point he was the GM under Dayton as baseball operations guy, like just interacted with him probably a little bit more than some folks here. But again, part of that might also just been because I've been around longer and have gotten to know them a little bit more. But yeah, there's probably some other things I'm not thinking of right now. But those are the things that come to mind, at least at the forefront.
That's awesome. It's really cool to hear about that. You mentioned going to different stadiums, and like I put this in the chat. I'm embarrassed to admit this. I've only been to one stadium to actually see a baseball game, which is kind of crazy. I've only seen a game at Busch. I've been inside Tropicana, but I didn't see a game there. It was for like some Christmas thing. It was really weird. But I was wondering, like, what are your favorite stadiums that you've been to, and then what are the couple that you haven't been to, I guess?
So of the ones that I haven't been to, and I keep forgetting every time I try and list them, I always feel like I'm forgetting one. But I know a couple of them are actually in the division. So like I still haven't been to Milwaukee yet, and I still haven't been to Cincinnati yet.
Okay.
Milwaukee's roof might cave in at any minute, they say. So I'm pretty scared of that place.
Yeah, those are two of the ones that I've never been to. I think up until this year, I had been to Philadelphia, but I hadn't actually been there for a game. So yeah. I think I was there once a bunch of years ago. Like I covered a series there this year, so I had definitely seen games there now. But years back when I worked in Pennsylvania for like a little less than a year, I did a lot of minor league baseball. But the guy who covered the Phillies, I think, had just come back from like a long road trip, and they'd been working like 2 weeks straight or something like that. And so they had draft night, and so they had me go cover draft night. So I was there in that ballpark, but there wasn't a game. It was actually they drafted Mickey Moniak with the first overall pick that year. I remember that draft night. That was the only time I'd been to that ballpark until this year. And then Dodger Stadium, which they'll open up next year. So that should get knocked off the list as far as places that I've never been to at the beginning of next year. That might be it. I want to say, because I hadn't been to Colorado until like the last year in Kansas City, I think. Yeah, I hadn't been there. San Francisco, I hadn't been to until like a couple years. I think it might have been that same season. So I think it might be down to like 3 or 4. This is where I always feel like there's another one that I'm missing that I haven't been to without looking at the full list.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, one follow-up.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is there any stadium that you like don't like going to? I mean, I feel like the Coliseum's not great. Tropicana's not known for being great. What's your like least favorite stadium experience? It's okay to say Wrigley too.
I don't know if there's one that like I just don't like going to. Tropicana is actually really easy as far as like a media standpoint to get to where you need to get to and get there quickly. So that part is like functionally, that's really good. For whatever reason, every time I go there, I just always look around. I'm like, it doesn't feel like a ballpark to me.
It's really
so
weird.
Like it just for what I mean, and it's not just the indoor thing. I don't think. I think that's part of it, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't feel like a ballpark to me. The indoor thing sometimes is a little bit weird, but like I don't get too weird. Like when I've gone down to Houston, I think I'm trying to remember if I've been there with the roof open. I think the roof was open like after a game, but I don't know if they actually had it open for a game that I've been down there. Been to Arizona. Those ones aren't. The New Texas one was kind of weird. Not bad, but like I remembered walking around the first time I went there and feeling like there's parts of that place where you could be walking around like on the concourses and stuff like that and almost not feel like you're at a ballpark, like or like, not realize you're at a ballpark because you can be sort of so removed from where the actual playing field is. It's like they put this playing field in the middle of this big, like sort of like small type thing because they got so much stuff on the sides and they got meeting rooms and like conference rooms and all this sort of stuff. You actually walk around there. So, but yeah, I don't know if there's one, like I say, that would just be like, I don't like going there. It's just different feels to different ones. And I mean, like the first one ballpark I ever saw a baseball game at was Fenway. So that's kind of cool just because like I know that's one of those ones that like it didn't really hit me until later on that like that's one of those ones that people that, is on the sort of their list that they want to go see. And it's like, well, that was the place that like, because I grew up in Massachusetts where I would go see if I was going to go to a big league game. Wrigley, I'd gone to a couple years ago, and I didn't cover a game there until this year, but I did see a game there probably in 2018 or something like that. So.
Yeah. Well, we want to respect your time. Oh, go ahead, Andrew. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I've only been to 2 stadiums to games, St. Louis and Toronto. So I mean, I guess next time people track my flights there. But I've also been inside the team's Vegas Stadium. But hopefully, I plan to knock off Dodger Stadium at some point this season because that's I'll always have to go see Shohei. So
according to Morosi, Andrew's going to sign a big deal.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was actually on Toronto at some point. So unlike Shohei. Yeah.
I kind of thought you were going to go to the Dodgers to watch Justin Turner or something. I didn't realize it would be Shohei.
No, actually, I'm going to the game against the Reds. I'm going there to watch. They have a really exciting shortstop prospect that I'm really excited for. I hope he's good. Like I don't know. Everyone says he is. So
Ellie. Well, Lynn, thanks so much for hopping on, man. We just appreciate you joining us and all the insight you had with this. And so good luck with the rest of the offseason as well. And we'll be following your coverage as the season begins as well. So thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Nate.